All praise to the creator, nobody else. Peace and love, everybody. So, they keep telling you that, oh, they didn't have slaves, and they didn't do nothing to you. Well, here's the thing: if you're benefiting from the spoils of stealing, because that's what it is, be honest with yourself. And your relatives came over here when you wasn't born yet and stole shit, then you're part of the problem unless you're willing to give it all up. I'm talking about all of it. And then give it all back and leave. Which most of you don't want to do because y'all seem to think, you have a false sense that y'all think that it's y'all's when it's not. If I stole something from you and gave it to my son, and 10 years later, is it my son's or was it still yours? Remember, if I stole it, that means it's still yours. So why wouldn't they want what they have back? And why would I want to put a burden on my son like that, knowing that eventually they're going to come get their shit back? That there's no way out of it. So you gotta look at, don't start saying we didn't do anything. Look at your ancestors of the past who did the wrong thing and start saying I'm sorry and start giving the land back and leave. I wasn't here before. I'm not hating, it's being honest. You know it's the truth. And this came out of a book called Coming for Souls and Gold. That's what they came here for. Souls and gold.
Contra. Page 212. When first contacted by Europeans in the early years of exploration, the Tupinamba were described as the most handsome and best proportioned people in the world, virtually creatures of perfection. Proportioned people in the world, virtually creatures of perfection. Proportioned people in the world, virtually creatures of perfection. They were, said Pedro Vaz da Caminha in 1500, people of, quote, fine bodies and good faces as to people of, quote, fine bodies and good faces as to good men, and a kind of generous people of innocence and pure simplicity to boot. An imaginative Portuguese painting of an adoration of the Magi from this time even replaced one of the traditional wise men with young and handsome representative of these Brazilian natives. Replete with distinctive featured feather headdress and gold earrings, bracelets, and anklets. At almost this same time, however, woodcut illustrations began appearing in other parts of Europe, depicting the Brazilians as cannibals and sexual libertines. And by the 1550s, when Brazil was in the process of being denuded of its native people by European slavery, violence, and imported diseases, those very same gold and feather Tupinamba decorations could be found adorning the head and body of Satan in other Portuguese paintings. A grotesque and horrific portrait of the devil's inferno. Meanwhile, in concert with the change in visual representation, European writers have now taken to calling these lately dubbed Brazilian paragons of pure virtue and simplicity, quote, beast in human form, to quote Nicholas Duran de Belladonna. Such ideological transformation did not occur, of course, without a social context and without serving a larger political function. The same was true of the earlier intellectual innovations we have noted. The priors of Florence had declared as acceptable to traffic in Christian slaves, who were of, quote, infidel origin, because to fail to do so might have undermined the slave trade with which the church was so profitably involved. How you know they ain't talking about no religious, Christian slave? I mean, my nigga, you read the Papal Bull. Subjugate all enemies of Christ, right? So they weren't subjugating, tribes that were actually Christians according to their Latin, Christianity, whatever their, JC and all this stuff, you know what I'm saying? They were subjugating the enemies of their authority. So these so-called Christian slaves, they might as well put an historian on it. They might as well just put Hebrew knights. They said of infidel origin. Let's go.
Discover matches all the cash back you earn on your credit card.
Because to fail to do so might have undermined the slave trade with which the church was so profitably involved in the limpieza de sangre, although initially inspired by religious hatred, soon became a valuable weapon of class struggle with which low-born Spanish Catholics could push their way into positions of authority that might otherwise be held by high-born persons of Jewish ancestry. Oh, let's read that part again. I like talking about ancestry. Although initially inspired by religious hatred, soon became a valuable weapon of class struggle. They're talking about the limpieza de sangre, S-A-N-G-R-E, a valuable weapon of class struggle with which low-born Spanish Catholics could push their way into positions of authority that might otherwise be held for high persons of Jewish ancestry. So what do the Jewish people have to do with the slave trade? And why are they in such high positions trying to push their way into positions of authority that might otherwise be held by high-born persons of Jewish ancestry? Are they talking Hebrew or are they talking Jewish converts? If they're talking Hebrew, they're talking you, but ain't nobody holding no high positions for you at this time. Not when we're talking slave trade. Well, then why is the Jewish being held as a high-born person relative to the slave trade? The doctrine functioned let's back it up, as Eliot demonstrates in his discussion of the limpieza, L-I-M-P-I-E-Z-A. Look it up. The doctrine functioned as a compensating code for commoners, quote, which might effectively challenge the code of the aristocracy. So this limpieza was some type of what they call compensating code, which might effectively challenge the code, or function as a compensating code for commoners, which might effectively challenge the code of the aristocracy. After all, they would argue, was it not profitable or preferable to be born of humble but pure Christian parentage than to be a calabero of suspicious racial antecedents? In neither of the cases certainly was the social or political or economic function of the race discrimination in question the sole and sufficient motivation for its being institutionalized. Each one drew for its authorization on a deep well of centuries-old and symbolically embedded antipathy for its targeted victim. once in operation. However, the racially oppressive institution justified, reinforced, and thus exacerbated the negative racial stereotypes that had made the institution permissible in the first place, which in turn further satisfied the institution itself. In the late 15th and early 16th century, Spain and Spanish America, the primary economic context within which anti-Indian racial ideologies were cultivated and institutionalized, was the feverish hunt for gold. Here we go. About to be back on that cities of gold. Cities of gold. Estebanico. Oh, we on your ass, Esteban. Lego. Then later, as the 16th century wore on, the context changed to the mining of silver, which was available in much greater volume. Spain, at this time, as noted earlier, was a nation with effectively no manufactured items to export. It was an exporter of raw materials and an importer of finished goods. Even within its own borders, Spain was plagued by a stagnating economy, with most local production intended for local consumption. With this broad and mountainous terrain, whatever goods were moved around were carried back by pack mules, and despite the presence of perhaps 400,000 such primitive beasts of burden, as an exchange economy, the nation was dormant. One consequence of this was both very small productive volume and a great deal of duplication, along with a steady outflow of capital to those other European countries on which Spain was economically dependent. In contrast with its state of commercial impoverishment, however, 15th century advances in ship design, primarily of Portuguese inspiration, along with developments in pilotage, navigation, and cartography, and the persistence of old Christopher Christ of Ophir, Colombo, allowed Spain, with its ideal geographic location, to lead the way in exploration of the Indies. Thus, it came about that one of the European nations that could least afford to finance colonization abroad, and that had a sudden overabundance of experienced military men within its midst due to the recent defeat of the Moors and Granada, was given first entry into the New World. Let's read that last part again, man. Thus it came about that one of the European nations that could least afford finance colonization abroad, and that had a sudden overabundance of experienced military men within its midst, due to the recent defeat of the Moors. So something about, this so-called defeat of the Moors, right, gave them an overabundance of experienced military men. Due to the recent defeat of the Moors in Granada. Something about this more, Spain situation happening in 1492 gave them everything they need to pop off. You think they just got military men, or did they get the drop? The drop on navigation, the drop on cartography. They got the maps, they got the secrets, man. They got the promised land, they got the coordinates, they got pieces of friendship. So what they call a defeat of the Moors of Granada led to overabundance of experienced military men that they took with. So when they came over here, who was jumping off them boats? Experienced military men from the war in Grenada. with the more. Along with Christopher Columbus were experienced military Moors that had just lost a war in Grenada. I mean, that's what they're saying. Let's go. The stories of indescribable wealth available in the Indies to those who could seize it, of riverbeds filled with nuggets and of boulders that shattered and poured forth gold when struck with the club, fired the imagination of individual adventurers, of course, but it did the same for religious and financial collectivities as well. The church now envisioned the wealth of the Indies, both in gold and in souls. Sound like Hijack City, they want souls and gold. Gold and souls. To harvest as the means folds. To harvest. Sound like Hijack City, they want souls and gold. Gold and souls. To harvest and sound like Hijack City, they want souls and gold. Gold and souls. To harvest as the means for launching the final crusades, while wealthy nobles and merchants knew that the crown was in no position to direct the conquest and exploitation of the islands without deriving virtually all its financial backing from private sources. For about a dozen years, from the launching of Columbus's second voyage in 1493 to the eve of the conquest of Jamaica, Cuba, and Puerto Rico after 1506, the capital behind the provisioning of ships and stores and mercenary soldiers was raised by merchants and noble partnerships within Spain. From 1506 forward, however, the conquest of the rest of the Caribbean was financed by the gold that was taken from Hispaniola. In 1499, after the great majority of the islands, millions of people had been destroyed. The long dreamed of gold. Millions of people had been destroyed. The long dreamed of gold mine was discovered on Hispaniola. Talking at Haiti, ID. Man, shout out to the, tribe in ID, producing for a time between 3 and 6 tons of gold per year. Per year. They found you with milk and honey in the promised land. They found you with pearls and gold in the promised land. They found you with pearls and gold. They found you with milk and honey in the promised land. They found you with pearls and gold. Milk and honey is pearls and gold. And who led them here? Oh, these experienced military men from the Grenada War, defeat of the Moor. Or we're just talking Moab. It's the American holocaust. Hey, school's out for this blackness, for this African Americanness. You're gonna have to show up, and you're gonna have to take accountability for the tribe that you are and the vibe that you are. And if you don't know, hey man, and don't be afraid to show a little A-High for a while, KTC, and you alright with me. But if you do know, ride with it. become correct. Because the truth got you surrounded in that wall. That Mem song. Shout out Yosef for that Tokef, but not heating it up, man. Five Eyes Mind, drinking how I die. Thinking out loud. Hey, shout out to Yohanna, the Hebrew Prince, man. We litty in the city. Drop City, that is, man. Let's get some more of this, man. So, we got some gold mines and IED producing between 3 and 6 tons of gold per year. Similarly, writes Ralph Davis, while the first attempts to settle the mainland coast were organized from Spain, the series of expeditions after 1516, which culminate in Cortez's conquest of Mexico, were backed by Cuban resources. Cuban resources. What's a Cuban resource? Stuff they're stealing from Cuba. Stuff they're stealing from our family. And they're taking that and they're financing more chaos, my night. More invasion. What does the Papal Bull say? Invade, search out, vanquish enemies of their Christ. So what were you connected with? If they have to introduce you to their Christ, what were you connected with? Well, I guess that seems to be the problem. What should you have been connected with? What should we have been connected to?
The Creator.
Only.
The Creator only.
Hurrah!
No name.
Allah, hurrah. We KTC. So they got the Cuban resources in 1516, Cortez and them, and the wealth of Mexico paid for the northward and southward extension of exploration and gave some backing to the colonization of Panama in the Isthmus, and a decade later to the conquest of Peru. Thus, one after another, Caribbean and American locales were raided and drained of their wealth. Nagas were drained of their wealth, a portion of which was divided among the crown. What crown? You ain't talking about the real royal. You ain't talking about Prester John. What crown? Who got the crown? Hijack City. Divided. Just like the scripts say, our lot was divided among the heathen. They cast lots, right? A portion of which was divided among the crown and the conquistadors, invaders, who provided the conquistadors financial support, while the rest was used to mount further depredations. Now back up. Who gave financial support? The crown. What was the crown looking like in 1516? Oh, Charlesy? We're still talking Charles Kento? Black ass King Charles, man? Yeah, you got a black king in Spain, man. You got a black king in Spain in the early 1500s, my life. Yeah. Oh, King Charles. So we got Moors in Granada that get defeated on paper. This is what they say. Moors in Granada get defeated. Then they got an overabundance of military men that are, of course, black, right? Moors from Granada, right? So now they get an overabundance of military men. That's the story. Whatever it takes, man. Whatever it takes to make y'all feel better. Whatever it takes to cover up the fact that our own people that look just like us are the ones that invaded us. What do they say? Like Esteban, that's the first thing they say. Oh, well, he was just a slave that was, leading these conquistadors, Marcos de Niza and them, Coronado and them. But nah, Marcos de Niza and Coronado were also melanated, but nah. Oh yeah, it's a full-on melanated invasion. Esteban's melanated, King Charles melanated, Colombo melanated. And if they say Esteban's the first non-native to enter New Mexico into the Hawiku Cibola complex, Zuni complex, that means that no other tribe, even if he was melanated, outside of that tribe right there in Hawaku in New Mexico, so-called, no other tribe, melanated or not, was going through there like that. So that can't be part of the Morocco in the mind of the Moor of America being some old Morocco. I mean, did that not affect Hawiku? Did that not affect New Mexico? Or are you just claiming little territories and casting lots again because the children of Lot are unhappy with their lot? See, the children of Hawaquan, Jacob, you know what I'm saying, we were given very nice lots, you know. Our issue was that, you know, we didn't KTC. You know, we got out of order with it. We got, you know, overly confident, you know, that we can rock without our source, which will never happen again, even though they've done everything to make sure that this Ruach Tardima is forever. But is it forever, Manak? Is it forever? It appears to be a more and more war, man. And you follow this is 1500s, 200 years later, you're popping off the cool saying it, right? So then they're doing the treaties, you know, the Choctaw and all that. I mean, you dig on it.